because you can't spell alien without LA. This is another weird incident from LA history that nobody, like the Murphy Ranch, nobody really knows what exactly happened, which is weird because thousands of people were involved with it.
I need to know more.
This is a story of the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, a.k.a. the Battle of Los Angeles, a.k.a. that day when that alien might have showed up. So
that's how I know it.
So not long after what happened at Murphy Ranch, the city was afraid. Pearl Harbor just happened, and it was all but sure that the Japanese would keep pushing east and a mainland attack could happen at any second. These fears were not unfounded. So right after Pearl Harbor, Japan ordered 9 subs to go on to the west coast and to just start sinking any ships that they found. One of these subs was I-17. So not 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor, I-17 attacked the SS Emidio off of Cape Mendocino up in the north. It wasn't sunk, but it was severely damaged. I-17 and the other Japanese subs in the areas, they attacked a lot of other carrier ships along the coast, and they were planning a big mainland attack on Christmas Day. Christmas Day?
Christmas Day?
The one with the Japanese sub as big as you? It was called off because the American anti-sub forces in the area were really building up. But on February 23rd, 1942... I-17 was still lingering around, just trying to find any unguarded military compounds along the coast. The best they could find was in Goleta, which is just 12 miles north of Santa Barbara, where the Elwood oil field was located. According to Parade magazine in 1982, the captain of I-17 had once toured this area before the war, but he fell on a cactus during the tour, and his American tour guides laughed at him, so he vowed revenge. And this cannot be true in any way, but a boy can dream.
Yeah.
So I-17 surfaced, and at 7:15 p.m. in the middle of FDR's fireside chat that night, the cactus captain opened fire.
I wish that his job was cooling people down because he'd be the cactus cooler.
He cooled off America's military complex a little bit. This was the first time the U.S. mainland had been attacked since the War of 1812. The sub fired 17 shells over 20 minutes before radioing Tokyo that Santa Barbara was in flames, and then it submerged and ran away. In reality, the only thing that happened was a pump house and one oil derrick was destroyed, and just people wondering
why is there a fire? Yeah.
Why did that happen? That same day, 4 Japanese and 1 Italian were taken into custody for allegedly signaling the sub to flare the attacks.
Yeah.
There were 3 confirmed Japanese attacks on the mainland during the war, and this was one of them. After this, people were especially high-strung, obviously. The LA Times, again, they said death to unions, and they warned people to be especially vigilant the next night in case there was another attack, because they felt like, all right, it's happening now. So the oil tanks in El Segundo, which was an area that Japanese people were not allowed in during the war, they got extra guards assigned to them. Lookouts were patrolling all the piers along the coast, Venice, whatever, what have you. Yeah. We should do an episode on that.
Oh, in Venice?
Venice.
Venice, Italy. That's not an alley. Oh, there's a by the Santa Monica area, right?
Yeah, Little Santa Monica.
Let's just stop this one and read right off of Wikipedia.
A sub was supposedly spotted not long before this off of the coast of Manhattan Beach. So Long Beach, they had mounted cannons pointed toward the sea at the ready. Fort MacArthur in San Pedro was well manned and ready to go.
Yeah.
Now, this is what you have to understand to make sense of what happened next. The people of LA were so scared and they were so tightly wound. It was like a chinchilla with its finger on the trigger of a gun. Like anything was going to set them off.
I love that cartoon, Chinchilla with a gun.
Chinchilla with a gun will travel. Pearl Harbor was that, obviously, there was that generation September 11th.
Right.
So it was that same feeling of like vulnerability and like how could this, like us, like how could we be attacked?
There must be some other Hawaii.
Yeah, it must be Hawaii, Europe or something. So it led to paranoia. And then we were set off. 1:44 a.m., February 25th, 1942, local radars picked up something 120 miles off the coast to the northwest. And they sort of raised alarms like, all right, something's happening. And then at 2:06 a.m., it was 3 miles off the coast of LA. And they're like, okay, I think something's happening. And then at 2:21 a.m., the entire west coast from the San Joaquin Valley to the Mexican border was blacked out. And there were air raid sirens ringing out across LA. They had one at the Griffith Observatory. And so what happened now, there's very little agreement on what happen. So first there were reports of one object coming in, and then another, and then more and more and more, and the reports were quickly escalated. Sightings were reported from Santa Monica all the way to Signal Hill that things were flying over them. Searchlights from all around the city lit up the night sky, and then one of the anti-aircraft guns opened fire, and all hell broke loose. So over the next 58 minutes, over 1,400 anti-aircraft shells were fired into the sky. There were 100 searchlights going on. 500 different guns across the city were firing.
Wow.
People said it sounded like the 4th of July times 100. The only problem was that nobody really knows or could agree on what they were firing at. So some people claim that there was one giant object that floated into the city off of Santa Monica and slowly made its way inland to Culver City and then south until it just floated off the coast of Long Beach. Some said that there were anywhere between a dozen and 100 aircrafts in the air, traveling from speeds ranging to very slow to over 200 miles per hour at elevations from 9,000 to 18,000 feet. Some people swore that planes were being shot down, crashing into the ocean. Some people said that one was shot down and just was a fiery wreck right in the middle of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. More realistically, some people definitely just saw weather balloons. So one guy even claimed responsibility for the confusion, saying that they were testing their radar system somewhere on the coast with some balloons with metal wires attached on it, and then the wind sort of blew it out of control and it went inland. But there's no confirming that. People were convinced that they were German planes that were launched from Mexico, or they were reconnaissance aircraft launched from Japanese subs. But reconnaissance flights are usually during the day, you know, when you can see things, and they're really high up and they go by really quickly. Some were convinced that it was an alien. There were reports of a beautiful pale orange object floating over their houses, which they think was an alien. There's even the iconic picture that was taken over Culver City that really looks like a UFO.
Yeah.
But when you look at the negative of that picture, which we'll put up, which is readily available to anybody, you'll see that the image printed in the paper was so heavily photoshopped. Like they manipulated it so much because that was acceptable. That's what newspapers just did in that day to get better pictures.
You should get bombed for something like that.
The most credible stories of what happened were things like the artillery operators. The artillery operators at Fort MacArthur was saying that none of them saw anything, but their commanders kept saying, fire, shoot at it. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, what are we shooting at? And then one just was like, okay. And they fired, and then everybody fired in that direction. And as a result, there was so much smoke in the air, it was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. The anti-aircraft fire itself, which you'll see in the picture, it looks like things in the sky, but that's just like tracers, so they see what they're firing.
Isn't that an entire metaphor for war?
Political.
Stay away.
This was supposedly the first time that an airborne enemy was engaged over the continental U.S., and it was a beautiful engagement. Only there may not have been an enemy there. So what definitely did happen, though, was that 1,400 anti-aircraft shells create 1,400 anti-aircraft shrapnel that rained down over the whole city. So a lot of property was damaged, and there were multiple reports of like unexploded shells just falling like next to a playground or something. A few people even said that like they got out of their bed to like see what was going on. They came back and there's just like a shredded up bed just torn to pieces. 5 people did die during this whole thing. 3 from car accidents and 2 from heart attacks. What also...
me and you would have been the heart attacks.
We would have been clutching each other's hands in a shredded up bed.
They're here for us. Die.
I told you it was an alien. I say Germans. What also happened was that, which you'll get into, a lot of Japanese residents were rounded up for supposedly sending signals to these planes, quote unquote. Executive Order 9066 was signed a few days before this, and then this happening was like, all right, we got to get rid of the Japanese and the Germans and the Italians for good measure. To make things even more confusing, the Army and the Navy had conflicting reports of what had happened. The Navy said there were no planes. The Army said that there were planes. There was a call for an official investigation, but that didn't happen until 1983.
Wow.
They concluded it was probably a weather balloon. That's the best they could come up with.
We could dance if we want to. Yeah.
You can leave your friends behind. The investigation was done by a guy named Wes Craven, which I enjoy. So even though it was front page news on the LA Times, the government was embarrassed and people could have gotten really hurt from it. So they sort of kind of hushed it up and they swept it away from the history books really quickly. Japan, after the war, admitted that it had sent planes to fly over the parts of the country to keep them scared, but they swore that they never did that in LA. If it was some sort of a wake-up call to the city to see if we were ready for an attack, we were not ready for this attack. People were frustrated. They were asking if there were planes, why did all of the guns miss them? And if there weren't planes, how could the military be so incompetent and just buffoons?
Just good questions.
Yeah,
Very solid questions.
One writer for the Times who had actually spent time in England during their real raids, he said about all this debate of was it a raid or not, he said, when a real raid happens, you won't have to argue about it. You'll just know. So apparently things like this happened a few times during the war. In Illinois, a town thought that they were being gassed. A bunch of people even claimed to be dying from the gas, but there was no gas. And even the other side was scared. In the Netherlands, the occupying Nazis thought that they were being attacked. So they started to retreat from the city, but not a single bullet was fired anywhere.
Run away screaming, we were wrong, we were wrong.
Sorry. Every February, the Fort MacArthur Museum has a reenactment of this battle, which seems kind of fun.
Let's be the two guys have a heart attack.
They have two sacrifices. This whole incident, it just shows how paranoia and the stresses of war can actually affect an entire city. An entire city of people thinking something happened when nothing happened. It's like the perfect Twilight Zone episode. Whatever it was in the sky that night, if anything, it was definitely not Japanese, and it probably was not an alien.
Yeah, that's embarrassing. Both of them. Both of them embarrassing.
It's just people like, you think you're going to a costume party and you dress up as a Nazi and you show up and it's just like a wake or something. A metaphor for Los Angeles in two stories.
Just blasting in the air at clouds that you've created yourself.